Welcome to the gear review. But first, pop. Another better than a cold pop in the morning. Alright, so here we've got the Konova K3 slider is laid out. Now, full disclosure, they sent this to me, and they reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to try this? I said, yes, I would definitely like to try this. And initially they sent the motor to me, and they sent the KMS S2 motor to me, and said, hey, you know what? I know you've got the K3. We're going to also send you a K2 because they've got the K2 on sale right now. I'll put the link in the description below. I've got the 60 centimeter version. They've for sale on their site, and I've seen it on Amazon and everything else. But they've got a K2 100 centimeter slider for $103. They're like, dude, I paid way more than that, several years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, like I said before, when I bought my K3, and I thought that was a good value even then. It's even better value now. I couldn't get over how inexpensive that was. That's a good value. I don't want to use the term cheap because this thing is solidly built. It's got a nice big fat head here, so you can put a multitude of pistol grips or fluid heads on there. When you're working with a slider, sometimes you bump or you hit something, or maybe the rails weren't smooth, this is nice that there's a little, check this out. So I've got a little guy in here, and it's got little felt pads. I'm going to put this right here. So with these little felt pads in here, this cleans the rails. And I don't know if I can get a good shot of this. But in any instance, you've got these rails in here, and hopefully you can pick that up. And in these rails, you want to make sure that they're clean, because if there's any like dust, debris, dirt, sand, because that stuff gets on there, it'll bump your shot, and you'll have to redo it. So it just glides in here to clean these. They're slightly oiled. Very nice touch. Moving on. I already have part of this assembled, and I kind of wanted to go through the paces of what's going on with this. What we're looking at is we've got a belt clamp here. So there's a ridge in here that this slides into, and this goes in here, and then this screws down, and it clamps it in place. You have to take this aluminum block, and this clamps onto the back side of here. And when it does that, there's a screw that comes with it, and they even send you, very courteous, they send you an extra screw. So if you lose it, not a big deal. So thanks, Konova. They've thought of everything. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to slap this on, and put this screw in here. Of course, I'm doing this all backwards. And what this block is for is to mount the motor. It's a motor mount, basically. So now that I've got that on there, I take my motor and I slap it on here. Boom. Take this block. So they give you these two to go with the kit. Make sure you don't lose these, because if you want to break this apart, it is imperative to have to run the system. That is good. Cold pop. Once I've got the belt fasteners locked in and they're screwed in tight, I can take my belt and I'm going to attach it on one end. And the next part, we need to put this through into the motor part. I almost forgot to put in the other legs. Let's see if I can get a close-up on here. Here I've got a deal to where I've lined this up. So it just kind of goes up and around. The manual is very handy to have in setting this up. I found it was very easy to, the photography was good in it. The illustrations were great. There was no question whether I was doing it right or not, and that was easy to figure out. Thanks, Konova. One thing about the belt, they give you plenty of belt to make sure that this fits on any Konova slider. plenty left over. All right, strap this in. You do want some tension on this, there's no doubt. Once it's tight, taut like a toiga, then you can definitely pull on the other end, and you want to get a good solid feel to this. All right, snug as a bug in a rug. Let's get the rest of this hooked up. Let's talk about the controller here. The controller looks, very clean. Looks like it's got a small LCD screen on the front, and then I've got my connection, my LAN connection here, which then it looks like you can, hold this separately and keep it away from there. Keep it away from the slider. It doesn't have to be on the slider itself, which is great to have. The nice thing about this is it takes two different forms of power. The Sony FP batteries, that's like a standard, or the F series batteries. They are so common. I use them in my LED lights, my LED wand. You can use them for just about anything. In fact, the field monitor I've got plugged in right now, that I'm using, has got one of those FP batteries in it. You can put one of those big fat ones on there. It doesn't take a lot though. They last a long time if you get a good one. And so that plugs in there. The other nice thing is that you can plug in USB power. So if you get like a USB little brick charger for your phone, it would probably supply battery power to that as well. So it's got a little switch right here, and let's take a look at that right in here. A little switch, and then the LAN port right in there. So I'm going to plug this in. There we go, snug as a bug in a rug. And then let's get a battery. Let's fire this up. So here's one of these Sony batteries I was talking about here. This is the no-name brand that I got off of Amazon. You can get them from anywhere. Take a look at that. That's a very standard connection right there. And one of those things that everyone's got. Every photographer's probably got like 100 of them. And let's get this plugged in. Power it on. See if I can get my my close-up cam. So I hear something going. Ooh! Now I hear a little hum or a hiss from this. It's not detracting to me. We'll see if the microphone picks it up at all. But make sure when you start this up and you're going to move it, that your lock screw is unlocked, is unset, your set screw. This keeps the slider from moving all around and getting janky on you. Now, if you have the belt on, it's not gonna go all over the place. But anytime I ever move my slider, I always make sure I clamp this down before, because especially if you have a camera on there, if you tip it any one way, it's your camera's sliding one way or the other, and you don't want it to fall off and break something. But so in just simple use of this, if I just I just want to play with this all day. This is so smooth, buttery. Konova was kind enough to send me two different cables, one for my D850 and one for my D750. And here you've got, take a look at that. Here you've got the D850. It's that Pro plug there. And you just plug this in, and you plug this into your camera, and then you're set to do like time lapse, hyperlapse, all sorts of stuff. Then this controls the shutter release on your camera, which is super nice to have. So as the motor is facing me, point A needs to be on your left. I'm going to get right before the bumper. And then I'll set point B. Now it asks me if I want to do live motion, time lapse, reset AB point, and then it gets into the settings. And so let's see if I can put this on here. If you can see that well enough to where that's where the settings are at, we'll kind of go from there. Let's do live motion. Let's do auto mode. Is that a manual mode? We'll do auto mode. Now the duration, it asks me how many seconds it wants me to complete from point A to point B. And then it asks me if I want to ramp it and loop it. So ramping is basically where instead of just going full stop in full bore right away at the right, at the speed that you set it, and if it's fast, you're going to see this herky jerky motion. The ramp will actually slowly, gradually build up to that. That way, it's not such a jerk reaction to it. So 15 seconds, that seems good. Ramp, yes. Loop, yeah, let's loop it. All right, and so this is pretty easy to operate. You just, and I haven't even looked at the instruction manual. I'm just going through yes, no, start point. Start point's at B. It knows that it's at B right now. And then if I hit start, ooh, just like. Now I've got my H1N over here. I'll link that in the description below. When it slows down at the end, that is nifty. So not only does it ramp up, it ramps down. Cheers. Oh yeah. So it takes 15 seconds. So if you want a little bit slower, you can go in and change that. Now you have to stop this in order to reset the time. So I'm going to go up 0 minutes. Let's go maybe to 30 seconds. And you can do it by 1 second increments. That's great. Maybe you want to take a full, and if you just hold it down, it will just ramp up to whatever. It'll just kind of go rapidly to the next point until you stop it. So I'll do 59 seconds. Oh, that makes sense. And then start. So now I'll make sure I cut the music in this. My H1N is right next to me for my voice mic, so you'll be able to see. I'm going to switch it over to the on-camera mic so you can see, and I've got a Rode video mic in there to see if you can hear the audio of this. Let's hear. Oh, we'll stop that. And then we'll get over into setting up my D850. Now I'm going to ramp this over. I'm going to go back into manual mode. I think you have to shut it off to get back into the menu. Not sure. There's no other controls on here. Set point A. Set point B. Take a look at the settings. It does give you different languages. Ooh, Chinese. I don't know if that's Chinese or not, but it's definitely not English. You can factory reset it, and it gives you a readout of the battery. That's great. Just having a battery tester around, even if for anything else, that's a great tool. Now I don't know if the microphone's picking up any of this. I'll switch it back and forth between these two mics that I'm using right now. But I am picking up a little bit of a hum, and at times it stops. Is that a deal breaker for me? No. Me personally, I don't know if I would ever set this up for A/B point and everything else, because most of the shots that I do are quick shots. If you want to do manual mode from point A to point B, you can control the speed on that, and that's where you set in the times. It would be great if there could be maybe a firmware update to where just do a full manual mode where you don't have to set an A/B point right away. Let's go ahead and set A and set B. You know, but for that price point, I'm not going to expect a whole lot out of the menu system of that, just for the simple fact that, you know, it doesn't take very long to set up at all. So let's do manual mode. Here I can go into the speed, and so once I've set up my A/B points, I would maybe like to see that manual mode right away at the the beginning of that. I don't know if that's possible through a firmware update or not. Ooh, look at that. Nice slow. So 25%. I don't feel any vibrations. They've done a good job, it looks like, minimizing vibration. For me, this is perfect because it's one of those, it fits the bill of, I just need maybe sometimes a couple seconds of video footage of maybe a pan, a slide, forward or backward, maybe get in focus, out of focus shots, and this really fits that that perfectly for me. What would make this even better is like there's maybe a handle to this, although it feels good in the hands, especially with a standard FP battery. What I want though is sometimes maybe a 1/4 inch thread at the bottom. That way I can mount it to the side of here or screw it in, or use it with a handle, so to speak. I don't know if I'd ever use a handle. Probably not. So moving on. Here I've got a fluid head and Manfrotto. I love Manfrotto stuff. It just happenstance, 10 years ago when I really got into photography, is that I just happened to choose a Manfrotto tripod. In fact, that's what I'm still shooting on, is the same one I bought 10 years ago. And it is ruggedly tough. So I'm using the 128 RC fluid head. I took the handle off of it because a lot of times when I'm shooting videography, I don't need all that extra weight on there or bulk, and I just want to tip it manually, or sometimes I don't even tip it at all. I keep the handle in the bag, but it's super easy to screw on. And then, this gives you your tilt, your pan, so it gives you a lot of options with what you want to do. Once I've got it set up, you just kind of run it and gun it. And Manfrotto did not, or Manfrotto, they didn't sponsor me for this, by the way. But Konova, in having sent this to me, they said that they haven't put the specs as far as like weight and everything else on their website. But if it's anything like any of the other sliders I've seen on their website, you should be able to set this up vertically, and you can run your camera up, to a certain poundage, and that would be great for a nice vertical shot. A lot of times you're seeing left, right, but a lot of times you don't see the up and down. You're only limited by your imagination on what you can set up, and equipment, of course. Here we've got a pistol grip. This is the Manfrotto. I don't know if you can see this, but Manfrotto 322 RC. This is a pistol grip that I got right away, and I love it. It's super tough and rugged. In fact, on my K3 slider, I put this my K3 slider on this, and it handled it like a champ. It's just super tough and rugged. You can set this up, so if you don't have a fluid head, you could use a pistol grip on here. And then I've got another pistol grip, is the I've had this for a long time, Manfrotto 3265. It's such an oddball shape, but it's so handy to have. I found this to where, once again, not sponsored by Manfrotto or Bogan. Oh, and I've got a little adapter in here. See that? I think it's time to get started on putting this through its paces. We're gonna slap my D850 on here, and from there we're gonna go in and see what the capacity is. And really the results will be in the pudding, the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak. That's it. Time for a pop. All right, so here I've got a D850 setup with my 60mm macro lens. The Nikonians out there will call it a micro lens. Lighting setup, I've got a couple of Neewer LED 308s set up, and then I've got it set for a 5100 Kelvin white balance. The other thing I've got then is I've got a small puck light right here. And then, of course, and I'm using that to illuminate from the front. Now, some people are like, well, it's kind of an odd lighting setup, and really, there's no rules to it. You can do just about anything you want. If I wanted to, you know, I could use a one of these Lytra cubes. You know, some people will use Manfrotto, these little puck lights. Now what I'm going to be doing is I've got this autofocus. I didn't autofocus it. I manually focused this, and I'm just going to be getting some detail shots of my Nikon FM3A, and from there we're going to just have fun. So what I've got this set up on, I set up my A and B points already on the slider, so it's going to stop here, and it ends somewhere over there, but basically I'm not going to get that far. I'm going to turn this back on. I've set my A and B points, and then with that, of course, after I set my A and B points, I went into manual mode and I set the speed to 27%. And then I've got the ramping on, and then I'm going to start. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to start recording. And I'm going to kind of, this looks super fancy, but it gets the job done. Now I've got a little bit further out. I kind of go a little further than I need to. That way I get any herky-jerky, even though it ramps up, out of the way. And we'll pick up any detail shots over here. Now, as I go in front of the lens, I notice that this is not in focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply pause. I'm going to get the focus where I want it. Oh yeah, razor thin. And since the puck light's already illuminating the front, I can maybe add a little bit more to here. Back it off a little bit. Position. And there you have it. So with that in mind, we'll go back, look at the footage, and then kind of take a look and see how well that looks. I'm going to get a couple more detail shots and then put a little montage together. And welcome back to this portion of the gear review. Right now I've got this set up in an interview or podcast style, and I'm going to try to do this all in one take so I don't jump this around. With that said, I'm going to walk through the setup of what I've got, and as I'm talking this through, I'm going to show the behind the scenes footage of me getting it set up, and that'll probably be chopped up a little bit. But ultimately, here's how I've got it set up. I've got my Nikon D750 set up on my Manfrotto fluid head tripod. That's screwed into the Konova K3 slider, and then that's running off of the S2 motor that's running it back and forth as you see right now. Now, the slider is mounted to the Manfrotto tripod, and I've got that into a 3/8 inch screw. Now, it's a 055 XB, which is an older model of a Manfrotto tripod. Not really a big deal, but for any gearheads out there that want to know what I'm exactly using, that's what I'm using. Now you can see in the behind the scenes footage that I didn't even take off the legs of the Konova slider. And ultimately, you really don't need to. If it's just something that looks nicer to you, you can take them off certainly, but not a big deal to me. Now you can see right here that it stopped when it got to my one AB point, and then it just moved right on back to the other direction. Now I've got this set up in an AB configuration in live motion, and then it's set to automatic. And as you can see, the behind the scenes view, it's just going right to left and panning back and forth. It doesn't really ramp down. It doesn't, I think at the speed that it's at, it doesn't really need to ramp down. It just stops and then it just moves in the other direction. Mic setup I've got on here is the Rode Video Micro. And in that being said, I've got it hooked into my Nikon D750 directly. So it's going into the preamp, not the best preamp on that, but it does pick up sound pretty well. And I've got it set up at a level 10 for mic input in the manual settings. I've also got my lav mic on, and then I'm recording directly into my Zoom H1. Now I could go into my Zoom H6 or whatever, but this is such a nice little handy recorder. Oftentimes I've used my Olympus, I think WS822. I can't remember the nomenclature of it. I'll put a link in the description below on that, as well as everything else. Now, if this was a longer slider and I wanted to have it to where I'm going to go from end to end, sometimes you see a dip, and we're going to see in the footage to whether or not this is dipping down. I don't think it's long enough for this to dip. If that happens, usually what you do is you take your tripod and you mount it on one end of the slider. Now, what I've done here is I've got a light stand, and I took the legs off this light. It's a super cheap light stand, so it's easy to rip these off. And then all you do is, even though I had my tripod's got a 3/8 inch screw mount, I've got a 1/4 inch on this. But the Konova slider on the bottom has both. It has 3/8 inch and 1/4 inch screw mount. So all I do is I'm going to screw this in on one end and my tripod's on the other, and then I just telescope this out to the height that I need for support. Pop break. For the last section of this, I'm going to play the sound of what it sounds like from the audio on the video mic. And then obviously I process the audio for my lapel mic in Final Cut Pro, so I'm not really going to do anything more with that. But we'll let you see if you can hear the sound of that, and we'll go from there. All right, next up we're going to talk about hyperlapse. And hyperlapse is that one thing to where you spend a lot of time getting a little bit of footage. Now, setting this up was pretty easy. I just plugged in the micro plug-in into the command block, or the motor block, I should say. And then I plugged the other end into my D750. Once I got everything squared away, it was pretty easy from there. I just went into the control unit, got my A point set, and then it prompted me to set my B point. So then once you move it, you kind of determine how much distance you want in between your points. And then you go into the time-lapse function in the control unit. And here I've set my exposure. The duration I didn't mess with, because that's going to be determined by like the interval in between shots and then how many frames you have in that distance that you set. So let's say I set up 150 frames in between, let's say 12 inches. That's going to be pretty smooth footage, but it's going to be even smoother, let's say, if I had 300. So it's just capturing more detail in between that distance, that 12 inches. Now, once I set this up, I can delay this. Let's say you're doing like a night shot, time lapse at night, which is cool. You can set that to delay like a couple hours. You determine the start point, and this point it was B. That's where I ended up at. So I'm gonna start there. And once I start, you're gonna see I set this up in my kitchen counter, or my kitchen dining room table, I should say. And you can see that second hand just winding down. And then I shot a vase full of roses. And you can see, like I said, you do all this work for a couple seconds worth of footage in the very end. So in a little bit, you'll see with this. And there you go. So that's it. That's the end of the gear review. Thanks for tuning in. What do you think? Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of all of the shots in there. And as you look at the footage, I think it's a pretty clear winner that This is a nice unit. It's a nice motorized kit. It's a nice slider, and it really gets the job done. We looked at the 3 different areas of detail shots. We looked at interview podcast mode, and then we looked at setting up hyperlapse, and the work speaks for itself. Please like this video, leave a thumbs up down below. Also, please subscribe to my channel. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way, if new videos are pushed out, you'll be one of the first to know. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time.